Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Monkman Drew, and I'm here to once again cover the volume extras for My Hero Academia Volume 38. Yes, I am once again late because of, life issues, but I'm here to cover the extras that we get for this volume, and some of them are very interesting. Some of them are involving Shigaraki, some involving Gentle Criminal and Brava, and the last part actually gives us a hint on what's going to be in the next volume extras. So let's just dive right into it and really talk about what's going to be in this volume. And when it comes to this episode and this video, I'm going to be a little bit more sporadic because the information that we have is not necessarily in order as it is going to be in the volume extras, so I'm just going to be winging it. But to start off, the actual cover is actually really good, actually really good. Because the volume is just an image of Toga, which is very well drawn, but then you just have this vivid colors just surrounding her, which may be representation of the bi flag when it comes to the colors in this actual volume, which makes sense because it is Toga and she is within the story most likely than not bi. But overall, this is just a very cool aesthetic for the volume. And getting into something else, we actually do have kind of a secondary draft of what this cover could have been. And this is where we get the prototype of it, where we get to see more of Toga in her full form as she's most likely using her quirk to transform into or out of the twice clone form. And we're going to get a little bit more information about how that may function within this volume. But we just have Horikoshi saying that a prototype for this volume cover, I was about to color it when I noticed that the composition is almost the same as the previous one, and trying to make it different, I ended up just zooming in on her face. Which, if you remember what volume 37 was, it was pretty much a similar aesthetic where you just have Deku in the foreground as well as a lot of colors in the background, but he is holding Bakugo in that volume, but you could kind of see where Horikoshi is going with this. But going from there, we do get a very beautiful opening pages to this volume where we get to see Uraraka and Froppy, which makes sense with the connections that we get with Toga on the cover. As well as we also get the table of contents where the volume is going to be starting with chapter 375, which is Chaotic Confession, where we get the flashback to Uraraka fighting against Toga on that island, and how this volume is going to be ending with chapter 386, which is I Am Here, which ends with All Might getting into his Iron Man suit, and how the title of this actual volume is Hopes. As well as we get a very beautiful page that shows pretty much all the characters of Class 1A dressed up in their swimming attire as if they're going to the beach, including All Might, with one small exception, which is Bakugo, who is not here at this moment, which, if you know what's happening in the story, you probably wouldn't be surprised by that. But going from the openings, what else I want to touch about is something unique that's going to be going on with the volumes, at least when it comes to the volumes in Japan, which is that within this volume, they're going to get 2 bonus cards, most likely, one starring Deku and one starring Toga. And what's interesting about these cards is not only are they colored, but you can kind of get their personalities from it, as well as they're just very much dressed up in a very pleasing and aesthetic clothing, where with Toga, you see that you get a whole bunch of hero dolls that are stabbed with knives and swords, while in Deku's card, you get to see all of the equipment of members of Class 1A or just heroes in general that have a connection with Deku in the background. So hopefully this is something that we'll be able to get within the English volumes of this, but I highly doubt that's going to be the case. And going from there, we do get another volume extra that features Kaminari, and from what we get with the translations, which unfortunately I cannot find, but it's basically Kaminari just commenting on the fact that Horikoshi really likes to draw the AU alternate universe styles of My Hero Academia characters in more of a fantasy setting, which unfortunately many people are very hoping that we are going to get episodes based off those AUs, but unfortunately we never get it, but Horikoshi really likes drawing them, so this is Kaminari commenting on the fact that Horikoshi just likes to draw it, which may be a nuisance to some people, or possibly no one. But going from there, we get a little bit of interesting information about Twice and Toga with the volume extras with a Twice and Toga picture book, where it pretty much explains that Twice's quirk allows him to make copies of things, but he needs some data. And for Toga to use Twice's quirk, she had to drink some of his blood, collected beforehand, turn into him, and then collect said data. They lived happily ever after. And this is very interesting because this kind of like confirms some ideas that we had, that when it comes to her creating clones, that she didn't necessarily need to create clones or measurements for twice, but however, she did definitively take measurements for characters such as Dabi, Shigaraki, and All for One prior to, well, you know, her actually consuming the blood. And the implication is that she drank some of the blood, then took the measurements while using Twice's quirk, which allowed her to create them later on when she transformed into Twice fully. So that is a possible implication of what this information is telling us. But also adding on to that, we also get this page being a reference to a famous picture book titled Guri and Gura, which you just see two mice, most likely in Japanese references of them just holding a basket and looking at each other, which is most likely happening between Twice and Toga in this small page. And going on from there, we get another very well drawn image of La Brava, as you just have Horikoshi pretty much explaining and reiterating who La Brava is, and that if you forgot about her, make sure to read volume 19 or just skim through it. That should do it, probably. I plan to reintroduce her in her frilly dress, but I changed my mind because it would be too much work for various reasons, so he drew it in this cover page extra. And let me just say, she looks very beautiful. I really like the dress. Unfortunately, we were unable to get it within the manga proper, but I'm still glad that we were able to get it here in the volume extras. And going from La Brava, we actually get a, once again, well-drawn page of Gentle Criminal and Lady Nagant, where we have that Gentle and Lady Nagant. If you're wondering who are they, again, please read volumes 19 and 32. You can just flip through them, that's fine too. And from what we see with these images, they look like they're very much dressed up in a similar fashion to La Brava, as if they're going on like a very fancy get-together, which is kind of weird because we know for a fact that Gentle very much loves La Brava and vice versa. And, you know, Lady Nagant is a little bit, but it's just a very beautifully drawn page. But talking about former villains, let's talk about the current villain, which involves Tomura Shigaraki, and how we actually get an explanation for a sort of inconsistency that was happening with Tomura Shigaraki within the volume covers and the manga, which is that his arm has regenerated and that his super regeneration quirk was damaged during the fight against Star and Stripe and got considerably weaker. So he just stole the near high ends, now he's back to regenerating just fine. And this has made some cause for concerns with the idea that Star and Stripe was pretty much useless and that this pretty much means that her destroying the quirks meant nothing, without factoring in the fact that Star and Stripe served more than just being like sort of a distraction or pretty much nerfing Tomura in that moment, but she served other purposes. For instance, she served as a connection and reasoning for why definitively the other countries aren't getting involved with Japan. For starters, she did serve a purpose for concretely understanding why the other countries will not be helping Japan in this moment, which pretty much leads to them pretty much giving up, but also ties America more into the story of Japan. There's also the true revelation that Tomura Shigaraki, aka Tenko, still resides within the vestige or new form of All for Tomura, or whatever you want to call him, which is built up to what we get with the reveal that this was all a part of Tomura's plan to retake his body completely, as well as the introduction of the fighter jets, who serve a major role in the final war to helping Deku get to the location that he was unable to get to without potentially damaging and nerfing himself for the actual fight against Tomura. So those are just a few things that Star and Stripe actually contributed to, besides just destroying regeneration. Also, this is a great explanation for why we also got this type of mutation with Tomura Shigaraki, which is that because his regeneration quirk was nerfed, it forced his body to actually begin to evolve to a point where he was able to regrow his fingers on his hand, which we see in this image, which he could not do with hyper regeneration. So it kind of adds to that idea and allows for the world to be expanded upon when it comes to what quirks can actually do to the normal body and what the normal bodies in My Hero Academia can actually do outside of quirks. And that's what we wanted to talk about with Tomura Shigaraki, but let's talk a little bit more about Kami and her abilities. Because we have Horikoshi pretty much complaining about the fact about how he thought it would be easy to draw Kami's like shoujo bishoujo effect in the manga in a shoujo style while using a mapping pen, and it failed miserably. As we get a little bit of dialogue and introspection about Kami and her relationship with Hawks and how she thinks most likely that he looks very dreamy in this type of shoujo looking style. And talking about styles, we actually get to see a little bit more of Tokoyami in the volume extras, where we just get a small photo of Tokoyami playing with Dark Shadow in the snow or in the sand, most likely in the snow. Both of them holding on to a snowball, just really showing the connection that they have with one another, as if they are truly siblings, because from their perspective, they are, and they've known each other since forever. Also, it's just kind of happy to see Little Bird Boy here. And speaking of Little Bird people, we have Shinzo, where we get another volume extra of just Horikoshi complaining about how it's hard to draw Shinzo's hair, which, I mean, it's very detailed, and I very much like it, but I mean, Horikoshi, you're the one that drew him, you're going to have to live with this consequence. Speaking of consequences, another volume extra that we have is pretty much more of a concept sketch for Acid Alma and how it looks great. And if you don't know what Acid Alma is, it is one of Mina's newest attacks that were able to do heavy damage against Gantomachia, pretty much melting his fingers off completely and having this very much monstrous style to it, which looks very good, and it looks slightly different here than it does in the manga, but they both look amazing. And going from there, we actually get a very cool reference within the volume where we just have a blank page that just has some few leaves fluttering through the air, which is actually reference to the leaves that we saw towards the end of chapter 384 when we got that full image of all of the people watching the battle go down. And speaking of the battle going down, we actually get a page that references Death Arms and pretty much connects to what we saw within this volume and within a few chapters of his return, which we have Horikoshi saying that Death Arms first appeared in volume 1, he is an OG. The scene where he saves those civilians from falling debris is a reference to an anime original scene from episode 1. It wasn't in the manga, but when I watched that episode, I thought to myself, I absolutely have to draw it. A scene like this from him later on, so thanks for that, Death Arms. And this really ties into really who Horikoshi is. He really likes referencing previous aspects of the manga in the current style, which makes sense for a manga based off comic books because that's what a lot of comic books do. They make references to earlier aspects of a series or a character's career and brings them forward to explain sort of kind of like, oh yeah, this is how we get here and this is how they got here. So if you want to read more of it, you can go back here, which really explains why he does this a lot, because he's very much inspired by comic books, and this is something that a lot of comic books just do. Also, I just like the fact that he was able to reintroduce Death Arms into the story because he was one of those characters that seemed to have that heroic spirit, but when he left, it was very devastating, but him coming back really proves that he did have a heroic spirit the entire time. So yes, Death Arms, I am also glad that you are back, and so is Horikoshi. And we're getting closer to the end of the volume extras with a few pieces of information that you may not have known or may not have realized. For instance, we have an entire page referencing to All Might's suitcase and how it was a reference to its first appearance in chapter or volume 32, and how it took quite a while for it to come back into the main part of the story, which shows that this is something that Horikoshi has been setting up the entire time when it comes to All Might and his suitcase, and that it wasn't just a last minute aspect just for the cool and hype factor. And going from there, we actually get a very special illustration in this chapter with commemoration of a very well-known volume cover that is adjacent to My Hero Academia, which is My Hero Academia Team Up Missions, where volume 5 is about to be or has already been released by the time of this video being made. And how Horikoshi talks about how there's a special illustration that this volume also includes a special illustration from Team Up Mission author Akiyami Sensei, and I'm so happy. It makes me happy every time. I usually call it the spin-off, the Bloodless My Hero Academia, the Real Hero Academia, and the New Hero Academia. Its 5th volume is being released alongside this one. Who do you think Akatami Sensei or Akiyami Sensei's drawing this time? Flip the page to find out, as we have an image of Jiro, very well done, of her saying, I got a feeling that'll be La Brava, but what if it's me? That would be kind of cool. And spoilers, it was La Brava, but once again, La Brava looks amazing in this art style, so I very much like it. And we do have another page within the volume extras where we get to see Horikoshi's assistant, and they're all drawn as if they are twice, which makes sense for what we got within this volume, so that's cool. And getting towards the end of this, we do get to see the volume spine for volume 38, which includes the image of Gentle Criminal, as well as we get both the inside and outside volume covers, which has an image of Mina with more or less like a lighter appearance due to the fact that she has used up a lot of her acid, so it's going to affect her skin, which which is why we see one of her eyes being white and the other one being black, as well as just an image of Tokoyami being curled up with Dark Shadow, referencing most likely a scene that we got in the manga where he was curled up alongside Dark Shadow as a kid, which is most likely what that is referencing. And finally, the last piece of information within this volume is the volume extra, which features Gentle Criminal, as we hear him saying that next volume, the story will reach its final stage. It's time to conclude many of the battlefields. Look forward to it. And this is very interesting because it seems as if this is applying to what we've seen within some of the recent chapters and what's to come within the next chapter, where one battlefield involving Dabi has been concluded, so we're going to be the conclusion of the other battlefields very soon. So that means that Toga's battlefield is going to be concluded, most likely what's happening with All Might and All for One, as well as what's hopefully going to be concluded with Aoyama, as well as potentially what Horikoshi hinted at with Sero. So that's going to be something that I'm going to be looking forward to. But yeah, that's pretty much all the information that we have for the volume extras for this volume of My Hero Academia volume 38. So let me ask you, what did you think of the volume extras? Did you like them? Did you dislike them? Did you wish that we had more? Or do you think that we got just enough? Leave your thoughts down below. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you want to see more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!